Hello everyone, and welcome to my video. This video will mark the start of a series I plan on making, going over builds and more specifically weapons. I will go over what talismans, armor, and stats I recommend, as well as any tips that I discovered throughout my playthrough. I will note, however, that I'll be making these videos around weapons that look particularly fun and enjoyable to play, but not necessarily an L2 spam fest. This means the weapons that I choose could be great or subpar, but in the end I choose based off of what weapons look like they deserve a new playthrough. Now with that out of the way, the first weapon that I wanted to build around is Leda's sword. To be honest, I've been wanting to make a build around this weapon ever since I saw the promotional art featuring Leda. It just looked super cool, and I was very happy to confirm it was a light greatsword rather than a straight sword. I will mention though that getting both the armor and weapon can be tricky as they are both very late game DLC items, so this video works best as a New Game Plus build. This weapon has split physical and holy damage, leaning mostly towards the physical side. It has the same moveset as the Milady Light Greatsword, except it has a unique skill called Needle Piercer. This skill points the sword upwards, summoning golden needles to lock onto and attack your enemy. This skill has a lot of range, is really quick, and has respectable damage for being such a low risk to cast. Additionally, the skill has a total stance damage of 19 if both the sword and needles hit. My favorite part is that even if you get hit out of the cast, as long as the golden seal appears, the needles will still spawn and hit their target. Lastly, it is important to mention that this skill also deals mostly physical damage rather than holy damage, which is good, as I'm sure you've all heard 1,000 times, but holy damage is the worst damage type in the game. Now, this part of the build is not necessary, but I would definitely recommend it, and that is the addition of the deflecting hard tier. I just love the guard counters of the light greatsword, and it just adds a fun option to anyone's playstyle. It allows the player just another way to approach fights and is super helpful against many bosses. Not necessary, but I do 100% recommend it. As for the other tier to use in the Wondrous Physick, there are many options, but I would choose between the Opaline hard tier for more damage negation, with the Thorny Crack tier for more damage with excessive attacks. Now, those are the basics of this weapon and should give you an idea as to how this build plays. I find that the skill in particular is very useful in this build, as it gives you a quick projectile attack that allows you to keep up pressure even with the small attack gaps of the DLC bosses. As for the stats of this build, I would focus on meeting the faith requirements of the weapon, but then going primarily into dexterity as it has much better scaling there. The weapon damage will improve much more this way, and the skill appears to scale off of the total AR, so again, dexterity is the way to go. If you want to add support incantations, such as Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, then pump Faith up to 25, but other than that, I would just keep it as is. Other than those stats, I would keep the typical spread for the DLC and have good vigor, decent mind, and I'd go for endurance between 35 and 40 personally, as the skill, guard counters, and the normal attacks all eat up a lot of stamina, so it's always a good idea to put your extra points into endurance. For reference, the stats that I am using for my particular build have been on screen. For talismans, I'm using my typical Crimson Seed and Dragon Crest Great Shield talismans for survivability, and I use the two-headed turtle talisman to help with stamina struggles that I mentioned earlier. The last spot is for the new two-handed sword talisman. In my opinion, this is a staple in the build as it boosts damage for all of the attacks and guard counters by 15%, but it will not boost the skill damage. While we're on the topic of skill damage, you may be wondering why we're not using the Shard of Alexander, as it is in almost any build that uses a skill. Well, that is because for some reason, as of patch 12.3, it does not boost this skill. I'm pretty sure this is a bug, as there are not many cases where the Shard of Alexander does not work, but luckily for us, the skill is still viable without it, but feel free to add it later if the bug gets fixed in a future patch. For the fashion, I'm using the Leda's armor for the chest piece, as it not only looks absolutely amazing with the sword and the hair color I chose, but it also has a nice bonus of slightly boosting attacks after dodge rolls, backsteps, or dashes. For the rest of the armor, I use the Oathseeker gauntlets and leggings as it pairs really nicely with the Leda armor, but I prefer to leave the helmet off as it matches my hair color, but that's up to you. I would also recommend the Circlet of Light that you get from the final boss as it fits the aesthetic perfectly. The tips that I have for this build are fairly simple. Use the strings of heavy and light attacks that the light greatswords have to build up damage, and use the skill to chip off health from a distance, or if you don't have a large enough window to attack normally. And if you can get in as many parries and guard counters as possible, that will grant you stance breaks. To be honest, every aspect of this sword's moveset is good enough to dive into, so there is really not a wrong way to play it. Anyway, that's all I have for the video, and I hope it was enough to convince you to give this weapon a try. I plan on continuing this series with more weapons I found enjoyable, so if you found this video entertaining or have a weapon you want to see featured, let me know in the comments. For now, I'm aiming to do the Fire Knight Greatsword next. I really appreciate the support on my last video and hope to make content that you would all like to see. With that, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and regardless, thank you for watching. Until next time.